What is up, Nole Nation? It's Jesse from Plant to Spear here with the rest of the crew to talk about some Florida State, kind of a little bit of all the sports today. We're going to go into some football here. We got a little bit of baseball as well as some softball talk to get to. First, Michael, Jeff, I appreciate you guys being on. Thanks for joining me, and hope everybody is doing well. It's NFL draft time coming up. The combine's going on right now, and Florida State's got a high number of players in there. 12 guys headed to the combine. And when you hear about that, you think, how can we be good, man? We're losing so much going into next year. So we're going to talk about how maybe the roadmap has been laid in the past. When you look back to the good years that Florida State had between 2012 and 2014, there's a lot of similarities there. So we're going to dissect that. So talking about 2023 Florida State, we know it was a great season. Look, I'm gonna say it, 13-0. We have collectively decided to just skip the Orange Bowl altogether.
That's right.
We
That's
don't need
right.
to we don't need to talk about that. There's enough negativity in your life. We don't need to talk about that too. So looking at that 2013 team, they did great, man. I feel like, when you draw a parallel between these teams from now and in the past, you originally you kind of want to go, okay, well, like 2023 could have been that 2013 team, and they very well could have. They just didn't get their chance to prove it. They didn't get a chance to go into the playoffs and prove that. They lost their quarterback. Obviously, that makes a big difference as well, something that the 2013 did not have to deal with. But I almost argue that this is a lot kind of like the 2012 going into 2013. And where does Florida State go next? Do they follow that path? Does history repeat itself and they have a 2013 type season? Or I would even throw this out there, Michael, that it could be a 2014 type of season where maybe you don't get dramatically better, and we'll look at some numbers to show my case here, but you still find a way to get to 14-0 and into the playoffs, or 13-0. When they went to the playoffs, of course, hopefully we have a better experience in the playoffs this year. But
Uh,
that also, I will say, like, that 2012 team would have been a playoff team
yeah,
at
absolutely.
with their record being an ACC champion. So it's all changed, of course, because
Yeah,
you have the 12-team playoff. But I'm thinking that this team can go into 2024 despite losing a lot of players and
yeah.
do it without missing a step. So I'll let you share some overall thoughts, and then I'm going to put up some slides for those on YouTube. I'll read them off for those on the podcast that kind of show what I'm talking about here. But I'll let you share some overall thoughts first. Mike, I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you could look at what 2023 did and assume because, we have 12 players that are going to the combine. We have some transfer out that, this is going to be kind of our setback year, a little bit more of a rebuilding year. I actually don't think so. And I know the names that came in from the transfer portal are are big names with little production. So that obviously gives you the angst of like, do I want to really project a certain record because
Right.
they haven't really produced? And I know what we are losing on defense, and so it makes you also want to be very much more cautious on that. But I actually think when you look at what the way we've played on defense the last couple of years, of how we switch out, we rotate so many players, so a lot of the younger players got meaningful snaps, not unmeaningful snap, but like critical game on the line snaps, plus what they brought in from the portal on the defensive side, plus what we already have returning from the stars that are coming back this year. And even on the offensive side, if you don't replace, like, just remove the names and just look at the system that Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins and all those guys have built, that they've been successful no matter where they are, you can postulate that we could see a similar trajectory as we saw in 2012 when Jimbo was really getting that system going with the type of stars that he was getting in there, to what we saw in 2013. Because I mean, we're going to talk about this, but you remember after 2012, we were like, man, we're losing a lot of pieces.
A
And then
lot.
that Pitt game, we were like, we're winning a national championship.
Right. I know. And it's true, man. I think you're right about how the system can work for the players that are in it, regardless of who they are. Because when you look at Mike Norvell's offense, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I remember doing my homework from back in the day. Outside of those first couple of rough years at Florida State, his
Yeah.
offense has produced a 3,000-yard passer pretty much
Yep.
back to the time where he was almost a position coach.
Absolutely.
So you just, again, it's adapting the system to the strengths at hand. That's something that their system works very good at. And when you go back to 2012 and 2013, you bring up a good point. They also didn't have the portal back then. They
That's right.
couldn't restock this with a lot of guys. You had to go with some unproven high school talent that you had recruited and developed. Now you're able to just go out and pluck a guy with 40 Power 5 starts.
That's
And I
right.
know there's some angst about, what DJU is and what he can be for this program, but we got some numbers too that are going to show you why I think he's going to be sufficient
Yeah.
for Florida State to get us back where they are, despite losing a whole lot. But Jeff, I'll let you share some overall thoughts about kind of the topic at hand here.
I mean, y'all were talking about, 2012 to 2013. The biggest similarity I see is behind the center.
Mm.
Yeah.
EJ left. We didn't know. We knew Coker and who's Jameis Winston.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all we kept. We didn't know. And Jimbo kept everything, like a good poker player tied to his vest.
Yeah.
And we didn't know till like the week of the first game who the starter
that's
was
right.
going to be. And then you see what Jameis did, and you look at back then, just in the recruiting aspect of what we have to replace. And y'all talked about it, all the people that left for the draft to similarities and what we have to do this year. You look at all the talent on that team that won the national championship that were freshmen that
Yeah.
produced.
Yeah.
Darby. Or Darby was I won't think he was sophomore or
He's
freshman.
sophomore-ish. Yeah.
And you had Jalen Ramsey.
Ramsey.
You look at that, you compare them. Now you got Charles Lester.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, the similarities are there in all aspects. And like y'all said, he didn't have the transfer portal to restock with. Norvell does. So it was that homegrown thing.
Yeah.
But you look at, I mean, just the star rating. Yeah, we had, I think, 6 5-stars in that class back in 2012. The star ratings aren't there, but really, in my eyes, the star ratings are overrated.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you look at a player like Sam McCall, who committed to Florida State, went to Texas A&M, and now he's back on he's at the Greyhound station trying to find another school. Because it ain't working out for him.
Yeah.
But you look at that, I mean, it's astronomical. Just this, if you compare them, like Jesse, I know you're about to, it's going to make every FSU fan optimistic and a little bit more excited about this coming up season with just how similar these two teams are going to be.
Yeah.
Right. And I agree, man. When you look at that 2013 team, there was a lot of players on there that were kind of like, who is this guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this, we're going to show you some names in a minute that were pretty scary to lose. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point as well. And then, just looking at that, man, I do remember that Pitt game too. I remember sitting on my couch watching that with a couple of my FSU friends, and I was like, we're going to win a national championship this year.
I was literally sitting on my couch and I was like, I mean, because think about this, Jesse. Think about this. We had was the spring game. And the spring game, I mean, it's glorified, but he makes that touchdown pass. I think it was to Kenny Shaw. And everybody's like, oh, okay, what's this? But that was really all we had to go off of. So, and then if you remember correctly, that Pitt game opened up with Pitt marching right down on what would end up being the best defense in the league that year, and in the college football season that year. Literally marched right down. I think it was like 7 plays, scored a touchdown, and we're like, oh gosh, what's this? And then Jameis comes out, and the rest was history.
I mean, hey, maybe over in Ireland, maybe DJ, you can have that kind of game against Georgia Tech. But I also do think that what Jeff brings up is a good point where you talk about Sam McCall. You also think about like a Demore Tate, who was a 5-star guy,
yes,
literally spent 2 years in the portal, and I think is now at Florida A&M. So it's like the star ratings on that 2013 team and on that 2012 team were, let's face it, the blue chip ratio was better than what Florida State has now. But it's probably not that wide of a margin because thinking back, if you know what the blue chip standard is, quote unquote, air quotes, is basically it says since its inception in 2013 to 14, no team has won a national championship without having a blue chip ratio above 50%. Now it still stands. That's one of the reasons why I'm mad Florida State didn't get in the playoffs last year, because I thought they could have been the team to bust it. But let's talk about some of the names that this team lost in 2012. So, I mean, look at some of the similarities here. So you lost EJ Manuel, first-round draft pick. Bjorn Werner, first-round draft pick. Xavier Rhodes, first-round draft pick.
I forgot about Tank Cardigan. Gosh.
I mean, like, you lost 3 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, and 11 total picks. You lost 7 all-ACC players in 2012 going into 2013. So you look at this slide, and for those listening at home, I mean, just going down this list of names: EJ Manuel, Bjorn Werner, Xavier Rhodes, Tank Carradine, Menelik Watson, Chris Thompson. Just the list goes on. And you're thinking, well, how in the world are we going to be good in 2013? And so then you look at Florida State, at their combine invites. Of course, we don't know where they're going to be drafted yet, but you got your quarterback. That's a similarity there. You're a
Yep.
high level defensive lineman. Then you lose all these other guys that are kind of along the same lines of what you lost from 2012 to 2013. And it just makes you think that when you look at how Florida State was able to go into that next year, losing all that talent and then not miss a step, to me, it's just you have a little bit less proven talent coming into next year, but the star ratings have gotten higher throughout the recruiting process, throughout the transfer portal process. So the potential is there. But
Right.
again, that was what it was in 2013 with a lot of the guys like Jeff mentioned. When you had Darby, you had Ramsey, you had Jameis, a lot of these guys who had not proven themselves on the field yet. And then you look at some of the numbers between the offenses and defense, and this is where things get a little bit interesting for me as well. So looking at that 2013 scoring offense, or excuse me, 2012, they were 10th in the country, averaging 39.3 points per game. The 2023 offense, now I'm putting a little asterisk out here because we're going to count it. Prior to the Orange Bowl, was 13th, averaging 37 points a game. So you're only about 2 points off there. Now, with Jordan Travis, had you not lost your starting quarterback at the North Alabama game, you were at 40.1 points per game. So again, you're within a point of that 2012 offense from what you did in 2023. Even on the defense, the scoring defense in 2012 was at 6, allowing 14.7 points per game. In 2023, it was also ranked 6 and was allowing 15.9 before the Orange Bowl. So the numbers are eerily similar. Now, I think what stands out is when you look at 2013, man, that team was so
Oof.
unbelievably dominant. It's hard for me to imagine Florida State jumping up from 2023 to 2024 to the second best offense, scoring 51.6 points per game. That's almost an unreal number. There's not many teams in history who do that. And then because I want to say Florida State still is the widest victory margin of all national championship teams or all teams in history. Now, you look at that 2013 scoring defense, first in the country, allowing 12.1 points per game. Again, that's a really high bar to set.
Yeah.
But I think if you look almost like if this team were to jump from 2012 to 2014, you look at the scoring offense there, ranked 35th. They obviously took a big step back considering where they were at 33.7 points per game. The 2014 scoring defense jumped, they fell all the way to 50th, allowing 25.6 points per game. So I feel like if 2013 is a best case scenario and 2014 is kind of what the most likely scenario would be, that they might take a little step back just with a lot of new unproven faces. Well, that 2014 team still went undefeated in the regular season, still won the ACC. That was the most stressful season I've ever been a
Oh my
part of as a
gosh.
Florida State fan. I think between like all the Tums and the aspirin that I took
Ugh,
that year, like goodness gracious, Bayer needs to give us a sponsorship for that one. But
seriously.
if you just even look at that 2014 level of season as being the most likely this year, you're still in the playoffs. You're still going to give yourself a chance. And I think what's even more interesting, and then I'll kick it to you guys and get your thoughts on these numbers, is looking at the quarterback. Now, this is obviously the biggest question mark for Florida State coming into the season is replacing Jordan Travis with a guy like DJ Use, where some people just aren't super high on. So when you look at 2012 EJ Manuel, and I got their passing and their rushing numbers listed on a slide for those watching on the podcast, but really what it all boils down to is all-purpose yards per game because they all play different amounts of games depending on how far their season went. 2012 EJ Manuel was at 264 yards on average, 1.9 touchdowns per game. Now, 2013 Jameis was at 306 yards per game, 3.1 touchdowns. 2014 Jameis, 305, 2 touchdowns. 2013 Jordan, 267 yards a game, 2.7 touchdowns. And DJU in 2023 at Oregon State at 238 yards, 2.3 touchdowns a game. Now that those numbers don't sound too different. The yardage isn't as high as everybody else here, but the touchdowns per game is right in line. They're higher than 2014 Jameis. They're just a less than a half a touchdown away from Jordan Travis. They're more than EJ Manuel had in 2012. So the thing is, like people in the national media outside of Tallahassee like to point to DJU. Can he be that guy to get Florida State? Like everyone always assumes he doesn't live up to the hype. And can he be able to lead Florida State to that level of success? But when you look at the numbers that we're talking about right now, his numbers are in line with some of the better quarterbacks that have produced the better seasons at Florida State. And
Yeah.
so to me, when you bring in a guy with that much experience, like you mentioned before the show, Michael, you're bringing back your entire offensive line. And
Yep.
so if they're just as good or maybe a smidge better, if they're average to above average, you're also giving DJU better receivers to work with. You're giving
Yep.
him a better supporting cast than what he had at Oregon State. So, I mean, again, I'll just shoot the numbers off for you guys because I had them down here. At Oregon State, now this is their star rating and the number recruit overall they were nationally in the class that they came out of. So at Oregon State, you had a 3-star receiver, 1,167th recruit, a 3-star receiver, 1,474th recruit, and another 3-star receiver at 1,395th recruit. So now at Florida State, here's who DJU, and we don't know who the starters are, but here's just about 5 guys that they're going to have a chance to work with. Portier, 3-star, top 500 recruit. Malik Benson, 4-star transfer, number 1 JUCO player in 2022. Hakeem Williams, 5-star, 31st rated recruit nationally. Jalen Brown, 4-star, top 100 kid. Destin Hill, 113th nationally, 4-star. So you can see the number, just the level, the supporting cast around him is more talented at Florida State. And so that's why I feel like even though they're losing all this, Florida State can go into 2024 with the pieces that they have. And again, there is another portal session out there waiting where they could add some more pieces. I think they got the horses to have a at a minimum like a 2014 type of season,
Yeah.
which puts them in the playoffs, hopefully gets them an ACC championship. And then, at that point, as long as you make it in, you got a shot. At least you
Yeah.
won't have the situation that happened last year. But yeah, man, I'll let you give some thoughts about that. But, when you just look at the numbers, this is why I like those graphics that you see on TV where, they put up information and then they cover the graphic or the
Yep.
name, they cover the logo because the production doesn't care who produces it. As
Right.
long as it's there and as long as it produces the results, that's all that matters.
All
And
right,
so that,
Jimbo. Yeah.
right. I know I sound like Jimbo talking here, but the play don't care who makes it. But but at the same time, I think it does reign true. I
I
mean,
mean, it is. Yeah,
it is.
I would agree. Like the production doesn't care who produces it; it just wants to be produced. And so, I think too. I mean, you go back to that 2014 team. I think that's a good comparison. The only place that it breaks down is that 2014 team had just won a national title. They weren't. I mean, if you go back and read all the articles, all the people who were, close to the team and reporting, all the time they would talk about how this team they just took winning for granted.
Right.
They just took winning for granted. They didn't take the game seriously until they had to take the game. I mean, I was at that Louisville game. If you remember that Louisville game in 2014,
Yeah.
Florida State was down like 28 to like 7 or something like that. It was crazy. And Louisville was going nuts. I was up in the stands. They were drunk. They were partying. They were yelling and screaming in my face like they're about to dethrone us and all like that stuff. And then when we got into like the second half, it was like they just flipped the switch. I mean, it started in the Oklahoma State game in Dallas. The whole moniker that year was Dallas to Dallas, if you remember.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really care necessarily about winning until it mattered, till they were going to lose because they'd already won something. I mean, you go to the Oregon game in the playoff, right? They got down real quick. And honestly, I still believe it to this day, that if we don't have those fumbles, obviously Florida State's going to win that game. They're probably winning the national title again that year because Ohio State wasn't that great either. So what's different about this 2024 team is while, yes, they lost a significant level of players, they're replacing them with what we believe to be and expect to be, especially in the systems that develop for defense and offense, players who are either going to bring comparable production or might even been better. We believe the offensive line is going to be better. We know that DJU, while Jordan Travis is a special and different type of quarterback, and a quarterback we'll probably, never see again at Florida State, DJU brings arguably a better arm, a better deep ball, a tougher build, who's going to run and take on those hits for you. The offensive line is going to be better. I said that already. And so you would imagine that also what's on top of this is the fact that they are coming off a historic snub of the playoff. And a
Yeah.
lot of those players are returning. And so they're going to be even more motivated to want to win. And then on top of that, and maybe this is not a good thing, but we have to acknowledge it, is that Florida State is going to be facing the pressure of having to win. We are suing the ACC to get out of here. We are the poster child of what is wrong with college. And I'm air quoting what is wrong with college football right now.
Right.
So the media and everybody is going to be watching us. So I feel like if they are to have a similar season to 2014, what's going to perpetuate it and help it is the fact that they are extra motivated to win because they didn't get the chance to try to win it this past season.
Right. And I think the interesting thing that you bring up is like, yeah, I think DJU really is kind of like he's very similar to EJ Manuel in
Yes.
build and
Yes.
play style. And, obviously EJ Manuel was a good quarterback, won a ACC championship at Florida State, would have put them in the playoffs if the playoffs existed back then. And then I think you also, of course, they lost Jeremy Pruitt. And I've
Yep.
heard some people say, like I've heard some players before after, 10 years down the road have said they feel like had Pruitt still have been there, they'd have won a national championship in
Yep.
2014. They felt
Yep.
like Charles Kelly was just kind of in over his head, that they were waiting on calls, especially in that
Third
Oregon
and
game.
Kelly. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
That Oregon game, the score was ugly, but it was pretty close,
It was pretty close.
late in the game. So, yeah, I definitely feel that way too. And I think you bring up a good point about they had just won some. It felt like they thought they could roll the helmet out
Yep.
there and just win. And, sometimes that success is hard to maintain. That's where promise notes come from and things like that. And hopefully we're a long way from that. But
Promise notes.
at the
Oh
same time,
gosh.
I think it's almost kind of like it's almost like you have a 2014-esque team
Yeah.
with the hunger of the 2013 team.
13. Yes.
Someone
Yes.
who was kind of had their heart ripped out when they lost to NC State
Yep.
that season, where they shouldn't have lost. That probably could have got them into a national championship bid. They were number 2 at the time.
That's right.
And so again, like I think you just get that hunger, and that's something that Mike Norvell even touched on in some of the recruiting trips that he's been doing, talking to the boosters about. He says these guys don't need any extra motivation in the preseason. They are ready to work. This is one of the best preseasons that he's ever had as a coach, period. And so, yeah, man, I just think that when you look at the talent level that they've replaced and the pieces that they have, and again, if you talk about going into 2014, all those draft picks that we talked about, they lost in 2012. Well, you also lost Kelvin Benjamin, LaMarcus Joyner, Timmy Jernigan, Terrence Brooks,
Oof.
Devontae Freeman, Brian Stork, and Telvin Smith. So
Gosh.
you could look at that as like, Kalen DeLoach, Dimitri Emmanuel, Trey Benson, you just look
Keon
at the
Coleman. I mean, just
right,
keep
Braden
going.
Fisk. Like you can sit there and kind of draw those lines. I
Yeah.
love the little Always Sunny in Philadelphia gif where he's like,
Yeah.
just trying to make everything add up and looking like a mad scientist. But that's really the way it works, man. When you look at the pieces that they lost, you would have thought, how do we recover from this? In
Yeah.
2013, you would have thought the same thing in 2014. I remember when in 2014 it was like, well, at least Jameis is coming back, but we're probably
That's
not
right.
going to repeat that. And then they just went on and didn't lose any games to the playoffs. So I think they can definitely repeat it. And Jeff, I'll let you share some thoughts on that.
We all remember 13 national championship hopefuls. Then the dreaded NC State game happened.
Mm.
Yeah.
Then
I'll never get the image of that fat dude swinging his shirt around out of my brain.
I was at a family function that night watching it on my phone, the updates, and I threw my phone. Like I was mad. But at the end of that season, they were still had a shot. Then they lost to Florida at home. This team's coming up is more like 13 because you look at them, they were so close in 12. They fell short.
Yep.
Granted, they wasn't snubbed. They fell short.
They fell short.
Then you look at what they done. They come out in 13 that season with Jameis. They were hungry.
Oof.
And you had mentioned it earlier. In 14, I was at the Boston College game in the rain, drizzling rain.
Man.
And that's the one that Aguayo had to kick the field goal to win it.
Yep.
When it should have been a blowout. This team is ultra motivated, the best, preseason and spring they've had so far, whatever.
Yep.
And another thing, Jesse, you mentioned DJ. If you go back and look at Norvell, when his time at other places, I'm just going to bring up 2019 Memphis. When he had a quarterback, wasn't scared to pull the ball.
Yeah. Was that Brady White? Yeah.
Brady White passed for 4,014 yards.
Woo.
And that's the thing is his offenses, they produce. And that's when you look at the production that he's gotten from quarterbacks who aren't 5 stars, who aren't household names, who are, maybe 3 or 4-star guys, and he's been able to get the most out of them when you talk about a Brady White. And so I think the point that I bring up with that is a lot of people look at DJU and they put him in a box. This is what
Yep.
he is. This is the best that he can be. And I think you look back to the days at Clemson, and he gets judged heavily off of there. And we see that Clemson has had some offensive struggles that
Yep.
did not get fixed when
No.
DJU left. So he wasn't necessarily the issue there. But then he went to Oregon State and had his completion percentage has to get a little bit better. Let's be
Yes.
honest. That has to get a little bit better. But when you look at what he did at Oregon State, that was with a less talented roster. And
Yeah.
so now you put him in an offense, a better offense with more talented pieces. Why can't he get better? Why
Right.
can't he have that
Right.
3,500 yard season through the air and then add it on the ground? Because he ran the ball over 100 times at Clemson, didn't run it as much at Oregon State. But, I just think, I definitely think it's not out of the realm of possibility that he can get better, that he can have a season like Jordan Travis had. Like I don't know that he's going to throw for 4,000, but I think Jeff brings up a good point when even you look at a guy like Brady White did it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
reason that he can't. And you look at all the speed they brought into this receiver room.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it's scary to lose a guy like Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, but it was also a little scary to lose Kelvin Benjamin.
Exactly.
And you were
Kenny
fine.
Shaw and
Right.
Rashad Green. I mean, like we keep going. We can keep naming the players that we've lost over the years that we're like, well, how are we going to replace that? And now, granted, 2017 to 2020-ish, wasn't all that great, but over
Yeah.
and over again, when they are able to recruit both, and you got to give credit to Jimbo. I mean, it was a machine when he was fully focused in the program. He was replacing player after player after player. Mike
Yep.
Norvell has proven to do the same thing. And so and then just one thing, going to your point about DJU, I think it's ridiculous when we say, and I'm guilty of it too, like when we look at when Jordan Travis first came in, Willie Taggart brought him in as an experiment and then gave up on it pretty quickly. It wasn't until Willie Taggart got fired and then Odell put him in and we actually started to see a little bit of what Jordan could be. And then we all said, well, that's it. He's really just a scrambler and he can kind of throw the ball, but not really good,
Yep.
right? So then Mike Norvell brought in Milton from UCF. And what we end up realizing is that had Jordan started the season, there's a chance we might end up winning that Notre Dame game. I know he struggled and then they brought in Milton and Wilton got him back. But I'm just saying, if Mike had stuck with Jordan and made the investment and said, you're going to be my quarterback, we're going to put everything into you, I think some of that 21 season might look a little bit different. But when he finally did, when Mike Norvell and at the time Kenny Dillingham and then Tony Tokaraz later on, when they finally invested into Jordan, you saw at the end of the 21 season they went 5-3, right? Then of course they went 10-3 in 22. Then they went 13-0 in 2023, all because they made the decision that Jordan Travis is going to be our quarterback. I say all that to say DJU can still grow. Yes,
Right.
he is a fifth-year senior. Yes, he's all these things. And so he is kind of what he is in that sense. But I believe that Mike Norvell can pull something out of him. When you look at DJU, the issue that he has right now is his deep ball accuracy is one of the highest in the country. His intermediate, so that 5 to 10 yard range, he's throwing it. He's not leading the receiver. He's throwing it behind them. So he's not putting it where they can actually make extra yards. So a catch that could end up being 25 yards sometimes only ends up being 5 yards because his media accuracy is the problem. You don't think Mike Norvell and Tony Tokaraz can get that out, can work that out? Are you kidding me? Have you not seen what he did with Jordan Travis? So again, let's not limit what DJU can be, and let's project based on what we've seen the trajectory of previous quarterbacks. Even, I mean, let me throw you a name out there, Jeff and Jesse. Let me give you a name. You remember what James Blackman was like his first year under Jimbo Fisher? I mean, they called him what was he called? Like the stick, the black stick or something like that. Cause I mean, the dude was just getting nailed, right? And even in Mike Norvell's first year, we talk about how 2020 and part of 20 wasn't very great, but even then, that offense was putting up yards against people. And James Blackman became we didn't have an offensive line, so we couldn't protect him. But when he got protection, he was not too bad, especially when he wasn't in his head and throwing interceptions. So you could see the progress in that. Again, I think we should not limit DJU by what we've already seen. We should project of what we know of Mike Norvell and that staff.
Right. No, I agree. And I remember Blackman as Slim Reaper. I don't know
Slim
if
Reaper, that's right. I was like thinking Black Stick. It was something like that.
Yeah. I think ours is a little more appropriate, but at the same time, I think that might have been his nickname off the field. But I think too that when you look at what Tokars did with Jordan Travis, I think you bring up a good point.
Yes.
That it's kind of like people had given up on Jordan Travis.
Yes, that's right.
But they were able to salvage his career, and he didn't really have a great year until his 5th year senior year. And then he backed it up with a great year in year 6 because he had the COVID year. Well, again, I know people, like you said, people will say he was the 5th year senior. He is what he is, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, people can learn and grow and develop late in their career. That's why the NFL took Anthony Richardson as the number 1 overall pick, not because of what he was in college, not because of what Florida developed him to be, because of what an NFL staff feels like they can do with him at that level. So, I don't think they should put him in a box, because I think that he can be developed by a staff that has shown the ability to develop quarterbacks. And so that's why I'm excited about what DJU can do. And I think he can be enough. The thing is, when you look at what DJU is, even if he just marginally improves.
Yep.
I don't think he needs to be like a 2013 Heisman winning Jameis Winston. I don't think he needs to be that. I think if he could be that EJ Manuel type of quarterback, if he could be that 2014 Jameis, averaging, 280 to 300 yards. I mean, even look at the numbers that we talked about with Jordan Travis here, 267 yards per game, all purpose, 2.7 touchdowns a game. So in 2023, with a less talented supporting cast, DJU put up 238 yards and 2.3 touchdowns per game. The numbers are in line, and we feel like Jordan Travis's numbers would have won us a national championship.
Yep.
So I don't get why the angst to think that DJU can't do it. To me, the numbers are there. It shows why they can do it, and I'm of the belief that he can be what Florida State needs. He doesn't have to go out and win them every game, but I think he's going to be a guy who is experienced, stabilizes the boat with some, youth around him at the receiver position. But I think he is what Florida State needs right now at the quarterback position, and he can produce enough to have that type of season like 2012 or 2014, both of which get you into the ACC championship and into the playoffs.
Heck, if he even reproduces what he did at Clemson in 2021, they went 10-3. I mean, he was thinking they were going into 22 like he was one of the top front runners for the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
So if he could give us that level of play, and then Mike Norvell and Tony Tokras works kind of with the refinement of some of those areas they do, dude, the sky's the limit for this dude.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that, even when you look at 2022 Clemson, he still led them to an ACC championship. Now, he didn't play in the ACC championship. He started and Klubnik played, but I mean, he got him there. So you also have a guy who knows how to win. He's shown the ability to win. And so, I'm looking forward to him getting an opportunity to prove everybody wrong. And so with that, Jeff, I'll let you share any final thoughts you have on this kind of conversation, and we'll transition into some baseball and softball talk.
Well, we talk about similarities, but there's also a difference between the two coaching staffs. We'll just say that.
True.
Mike Norvell inherited what?
A dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire. Jimbo Fisher was able to recruit his system for how many years? 5 years.
Yeah, 5. Yep.
Before we started seeing a difference. You look at all the players that came through under Jimbo. Just the strength, though, just the offensive linemen. You referenced Brian Stork and then compared him to Dimitri Emanuel or one we lost this year. The only difference is, I don't know many college football players that won a national championship one year and then was a starting center for the Patriots and won a Super Bowl.
I know.
That's right. That's right.
But you look at it, had Norvell and Jimbo didn't, it wasn't like he was having to come in and redo everything.
Right.
He took over from the GOAT, the legend, Bobby Bowden, who had set that foundation. Where Mike Norvell come in and, the cupboard was bare. The little gnat flew out when he opened it up. It was horrible. Yeah. But when you talk about DJ's a bigger frame than what we had with Jordan.
Yep.
And granted, we all love Jordan Travis, but the last 2 years, he wasn't, he was more pass heavy. He wasn't as free to pull it. And like me and Jesse, me and you mentioned it before, you know, when he pulled the ball in the early years,
Woo.
that forced that offense to respect both aspects. So they
Yeah.
had to play
Right.
as true.
Yep.
To where last year, I mean, I mentioned it, and the last time I was on the show was, it's like he was forcing the deep pass.
Yep.
And Jordan wasn't very accurate in the deep ball. Where you bring in DJU now, accurate in the deep ball, and you just, I mean, you've got fast and furious. Line them up however you want to and receiver, and they're going to they're going to go out there and get it.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, you look at the similarities. This year should be, especially with the 12-team playoff.
Yeah.
We'll be in the playoff. I don't see, you know, anything stubbing us in our regular season. Maybe the Notre Dame game, but that one don't hurt us with the conference.
Right.
But even this coming up year, losing as much as we did, I mean, there's still unproven talent, just like in 13, that's going to step in.
Yep.
You look at Warner, you got to compare him to a Jared Verse, you know, because he was dominant on that
Yes,
outside.
he was. Yes, he was.
You know, and then you look at that 12 team. Yeah, we had Kelvin Benjamin, but Kelvin Benjamin was not Kelvin Benjamin of 13.
That's
No.
right. He was different.
Yeah.
You're right.
You
Yeah.
know, he was actually, I hate to say it like this, he was getting in trouble from people I know from that team because he was overweight. Like he
Yeah.
didn't care. He didn't take
Yeah.
it serious until that year, that national championship year.
Yeah.
And then he was what? The most dangerous receiver on the field. Compare him to a Hakeem Williams. Didn't see much playing time. You know, it wasn't bad, but now he's got another year of development.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
so I mean, it's there. Or a Kyle Morlock. We'll just say that. If you want to throw in some height there because of
Yeah.
Kelvin.
Yeah. Who proved, and Kyle Morlock proved that, you know, this year he got a lot of significant playing time, and he proved that, you know, once he gets those hands, because man, there was so many balls he dropped that I wanted to choke him on, but once he gets those hands corrected, dude, he could be a legit tight end prospect for us. And of course, we got Landon Thomas coming in, #1 tight end in the country in recruiting. So for sure, Jeff, like absolutely, like those comparisons. And the thing is, this is a team that Mike Norvell already has the culture set. He already has the strength and conditioning with Coach Storm set. I mean, they know what to expect. And so really what you've seen over the last couple of years, why Florida State has been the #1 portal destination for a lot of these high talented, already producing or somewhat producing kids, is because it's almost to a plug and play where they are picking and choosing the type of player they need based on the talent, based on the production that they think they can get, and they're plugging them right in. And then the best part about this, what I think is Mike Norvell is not one of these rigid coaches that are just plugging and playing people into a system and the system doesn't change. He plugs and plays them into the system, and then if the system needs to change, he adapts the offense around them. I mean, one of the reasons why Jordan Travis wasn't running a lot this year and towards the end of last year is because we realized, or not we, the coach staff realized that this dude is injury prone. And so they slowed down the running, started throwing the ball more, and look what happened. Look what happened when we run him against Northern freaking Alabama.
I know.
So those are some of the good things that could happen for sure.
Yeah, and I like the point that you bring up there, just when you talk about that, because looking at the running ability that you're going to get from DJU, I know there is that risk there as well. It does open things up, and you look at Norvell over the years. I mean, he is produced with mobile quarterbacks. He is produced with guys that stand still in the pocket
passers. Yeah,
you've also had where I think it was 2021 where we ran for it was like 200 yards a game because he knew he had Jordan Travis who could run the ball, and you just unleashed the strength that you had. So that's what's so exciting is him being able to tailor the offense to the talent that he has. I also think a couple of interesting points when you talk about the differences between the two staffs is, you know, now Mike Norvell has had a chance to bring in guys that early on he just brought in guys like give me
bodies.
Give me someone with a pulse. Now, you know, now you're bringing in guys that are tailored more for your system because you can also pick and choose. I'm sure if he wanted to go find a 6'4" receiver, he'd go find a 6'4" receiver. If he wants a guy who's fast, he's going to go find it because you're a portal destination now. And I think what's impressed me the most about this coaching staff is the fact that they have been able to win at the level that they have, especially in 2023, not with the talent level that they had in 2012 and 2014. I mean, he still has not had a top 15 talented team in the 247 talent composite rating. So for me, what that says is you have a coaching staff that has produced at a high level. And that doesn't mean the guys that we have aren't talented. Like Jeff said earlier, I don't really care about the star ratings, but they are what they are. The blue chip standard is what it is until it's not. It hasn't been
Right.
broken yet. But if they can go out and win with that less talented roster, then to me, that's more encouraging than, giving a bad driver a Ferrari and he turns out a good lap, or giving,
Right.
like, God rest his soul, Dale Earnhardt, like
Mm.
a Honda Civic, and he goes out and he runs with the guy. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right.
you have a staff who can do more with less. Imagine what that staff can do with more.
That's
And I
right.
think that's something that you're going to see coming up, not only in 2024, but going forward as the recruiting rankings bump up too. So that's why, yeah, man, I just think it was a fun conversation. Again, guys, keep in mind it's the dead period. We're just kind of digging through things to find something football to talk about. And so I thought that'd be a fun little comparison there about why Florida State, with the combine on the top of our mind right now and having a lot of guys departing this program, why Florida State can go into 2024 and follow a blueprint. I know it's a different staff, but maybe that's been laid in the past. Can history repeat itself? And I think it can. Now, I will say one thing that you can always rely on being good from year to year, and
Let's
you don't ever
go.
have to worry about it.
Let's
And
go.
that's Alumni Hall FSU, the sponsor for today's episode. So we appreciate those guys supporting us. Go check them out at their new location, 1415 Timber Lane Road, and load up on all the new FSU gear you want. Spring game's coming up. You're going to want to look fresh for that. Go check them out. Use code SPEAR to get 10% off online or in store. And again, we appreciate you for supporting those that support us. That's Alumni Hall FSU. So now there's a little bit more to talk about. There's some stuff going on. It's springtime. We got some other sports going on. And, we want to round out our coverage here. I know football is the meat and potatoes of the conversation. That's what everybody comes for. But I want to touch on this baseball team and this softball team a little bit because, they get us by until the season is back. Basketball just kind of wanders off into the darkness, and we'll see we'll see what happens with that. But so far, this baseball team is off to a hot start, 7-0, looking at a couple of winnable games that might be a little different this weekend. Me and Jeff were talking last night. You look at Illinois, not very good. You look at Michigan State, their record's not very good. And then they ruled Georgia last night, who was 8-0. So that might be a challenge this weekend. I think the story when you talk about this baseball team is, first off, it looks good. I mean, they're starting out good. They're off to a 7-0 start. But this is a crucial point in the season because last year, we know they started 6-1 in their first 7 games. They won a series against TCU, who was a top 10 team at the time. They won a series against James Madison, who was a pretty decent team from the G5 level. This year, it's just kind of they've been beaten up on some bad competition. Probably the best team they beat is USF or Western Carolina. 3 of the 4 teams that they played had a losing record, and none of them made the postseason last year. So we got to find out whether they can win against the better competition. This is kind of something that softball is going through right now as well. But, Jeff, I'll kick it to you on this. I think what you see from this team is, and I wrote an article on this the other day, if you guys want to check it on the website. If you look at just the way this team plays, keeping in mind the level of competition, you can see the little areas of improvement. And we can start with offense, is just the plate discipline, I think, and the power in the lineup. And just the production from the top to the bottom of the order. You don't really have any dead outs in this lineup. A lot of the transfers you brought in are making a big impact. Again, keeping in mind the level of competition, Florida State has 13 more hits, 19 more walks, and 21 fewer strikeouts through this game, through this point last year, through the first 7 games. So you can see them start to tick up. They're 11.6 runs per game on average. They are top 10 in runs per game, hits per game, and win margin. So they've dominated these teams early on, but once the competition ramps up, and it's coming, they got Florida Gulf Coast coming up. They got Florida, who's top 5 coming up twice in the month of March. We're going to find out how good this team really is. But the signs look better than I think they did last year. But they're going to have to stay healthy, and they're going to have to prove it against a better competition.
And you're right. I mean, you look at last year, we didn't have as many arms on the mound.
Yeah.
You had Wyatt Crowell, who played in the Cape Cod League that summer, had scouts coming out every time the Dick Hauser was opened up because of him. He went out early. I want to say it was right after the Florida Gulf Coast series, which is what really led to that's when we've seen, we opened up, what was we, 6-1, I think. We beat TCU. Everybody was, oh my God, Link Jarrett's turned it around in a few months.
We're all excited.
I mean, I was going out to buy a baseball jersey. They just didn't make one that big. I mean, you can't buy a Florida State tent, but whenever it comes to that, but then when we lost that series, you've seen it, and you seen where the issues were, the same issues that came up when Coach Martin was the coach, when Meat took over. And that's not what Link Jarrett had. And Link's finally fixing it. And Micah Posey is the pitching coach coming in this year has been night and day different. Because you look at this year, I mean, and you brought up some stats, but what stands out to me is you look at, you got Cam Leiter. It's his money year, really, because he can go into the draft this season. Dominant. There's your Friday starter. I would compare him, if you want to look at anybody to compare him to in the past, that's a Parker Messick on the mound. I mean, 8 to 15 strikeouts a game. And since that season, since Meat's last season, we never had that solid number 2 like we got now. When you look at, it was always, okay, we're going to win Friday, but what about Saturday? Saturday we're going to be, oh my God. Then you got Jamie Arnold on Saturday. Who has a better ERA than Cam Leiter.
Wow.
And only one less strikeout.
And one less strikeout. I mean, and when you have Jamie Arnold at a 0.00 ERA in 2 games, that says something. And he's your Saturday starter.
And I'll get your opinion on this, but I think there will eventually move Connor Whitaker probably to the Sunday starter role. That's probably your 3rd starter there. I know right now he's been hitting the midweeks, but I think that's your number 3 guy. I think you obviously want Cam Leiter as your Friday starter. And like you said, he's a chip off of Parker Messick with just the attitude. I mean, he yells at the other dugout. He's a fiery type of guy. And then obviously Jamie Arnold has really come on this year and is just slinging heat. But then I think you're going to move Connor Whitaker to that 3rd Sunday role. That way you have 3 really good starters for your weekend series.
Yeah, I mean, which he was penciled in for the starter. He's a normal Sunday starter, was supposed to be at the beginning of the season. But then that Saturday game happened against Butler where it got canceled. They moved Jamie to the Sunday for that weekend and moved him to midweek, which has kind of been his rotation. But once you find another starter, another quality starter, which, I mean, if you look at, you've got Carson Dorsey. He's got a 1.59 ERA, and he comes in relief, and he's dominant. I think we could see him come to that midweek starter, that midweek, and put Connor, or who knows, Dorsey may show up one time and they move him to Sunday. You never know that.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and that's where we've struggled so much here lately in the baseball is we can't hit the strike zone, in years past, to where now it's, I mean, we got 109 strikeouts.
Unreal.
In 7 games. I mean, and when you look at it, 109 strikeouts to 40 walks.
That's insane.
That's insane. And if they are getting a bat on the ball, they're hitting it strong to somebody. And the fielding has improved drastically this year. So, I mean, it's looking up. I'm happy to watch Florida State baseball again.
Okay.
It's fun to watch, and I'll kick it to you, to Michael after this. But the thing I want to follow up on that is I think you're right. I mean, the defense has certainly improved when you just talk about the depth and variety that they have coming out of the bullpen, for that pitching staff. You got 4 guys that are already in double-digit strikeouts. Cam Leiter's got 21. Jamie Arnold has 20. This staff has 109 strikeouts this season, like you mentioned. Right now, as of yesterday, when I was doing the research for that article I wrote, they're at 15.6 strikeouts per 9 innings. That is number 1 in all of college baseball right now.
Wow.
The only team that had more strikeouts than them as of February 28th was Arkansas, and they had played an extra game, and they only had 4 more strikeouts. So, I mean, again, you have to remember the level of competition, but this pitching staff has been lights out. And then the guys behind them, they've literally cut their errors in half this season. Through 7 games last year, they had 13 errors. This year, it's down to 6. They've had 4 out of their 7 games where they have not given up an error at all. And last year, it took them 14 games to get there. So the fielding has definitely got a lot better. Now, I also want to talk about the offense, which, jumping back to what I mentioned earlier, where you look at the higher on-base percentage because the plate discipline has gotten better. They've cut down on their strikeouts a lot. they also kill it when they get on the bases with their base running. They lead the ACC in stolen bases with 18. Through 7 games
Wow.
last year, they only had 4. So, I mean, and the thing I find interesting too is they've got some speed on the baseline because they are 18 of 18 on stolen bases. They have not
Wow.
been picked off not a single time this year. So you see it. I mean, you see the Link Jarrett-esque traits from like me and Jeff talked about on the baseball preview episode, where his team is not a team that commits a lot of errors. They're a very plate discipline heavy team. They play smart baseball, and you're starting to see that come through now. It's just, can they do it against the better competition? Because going back to what Jeff had mentioned, where early in the season, everybody's eyes were open. Is this thing back already? When you beat TCU, I mean, let's be honest, that's like Florida State coming out and beating LSU. You were like, whoa, hey,
Yeah.
this is, we're off to a great start. Then it went sideways. Like Jeff mentioned, they lost that series to Florida Gulf Coast. They went 5-5 in their next 10 games, and then they went 2-19. And
Yeah.
that was hard. They found some late season momentum. They won 10 of their last 16, including a win over number 1 ranked Wake Forest. And so coming up, I mean, you got 9 games left until you hit ACC play. You start with Notre Dame. And then just in the month of March, you have Notre Dame, you have a top 10 Clemson team, you have a top 5 Florida team twice, you have Florida Gulf Coast. They're going to get a lot of chances to prove whether they're for real or not. Now, they still got some winnable series against New Orleans. And then, like I said, I think they're going to get past Illinois, and they should beat Michigan State unless they just play above their head again. That Western Michigan game might be a little bit tough. But I think that the best part of having this early season kind of weaker competition is the ability for them to test some guys out, see what they got, make adjustments, give guys opportunities. They've already got 16 guys a chance to throw off the mound. They've got 17 guys, multiple at bats. So they're able to really feel out the depth and find the pieces that they got. I just think they're going to have to stay healthy, and it's going to be a little bit of a test period coming up against some of these tougher programs that they got. But Michael, I'll get some of your thoughts on the baseball program so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, I've been excited. I was really excited for when they got Link to come back and watch that whole press conference, and was geared up to become more of a more into Florida State baseball. I kind of but previously during the meat era, just kind of my fandom kind of fell off. When 11 was there, I was watching every game I could watch that was on TV, because you always had this understanding that you're always on the cusp of a College World Series. Well, when me, took over, just that all fell off. And I know there are multiple reasons for why that happened, but with Link coming in, we're really excited. They started off the year hot, and then it was, like you said, it was a complete just train wreck. And I think that had a lot to do with culture, had a lot to do with talent, the lack of talent, and just kind of had to take their lumps. And so now here we are again, starting off kind of hot. They've been really good so far, but I'm waiting for the test. I want to see them against actual quality, good college baseball teams to see where the progress is happening, to see if those arms are what we think they are. Like, are they gonna compete at the same level that we're seeing them right now? If the bats are gonna stay hot. I mean, they're 36 in the country right now. They got 91 hits on the season. They're hitting 368. Fifth in batting average in the nation right now. Are those bats going to stay as hot when they start competing against those higher quality teams? Of course, with Florida coming, they play them twice in March. So those are really going to be,
Yeah.
I'm not saying they got to win them. I'm not saying they have to win the series outright, though sweeping the Gators would be fantastic. But let's just see some progress. Let's see how well they do, how the arms play, how the bats go, if the fielding stays good. I think that's how we're going to be able to really judge what the rest of the season could look like.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I think when they start ACC play with that Notre Dame series coming up March 15th through the 17th, I mean, realistically, even not sweeping everything, I think this team can come into that point with probably around 15 to 16 wins,
Yeah.
which, when you only won, and I'll let Jeff correct me on this if I'm wrong, but wasn't it like 23 games total last year? And you're talking about 15 to 16, maybe 18 wins before you even get into conference play.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big improvement. I mean, but again, we're going to have to see what they do against that better competition. But what you mentioned, what they've done in the portal, some of the young guys that they developed last year, where you just took your lumps and you stuck with them and you developed them, you can really see it paying off this year. And this team is so much more talented from top to bottom, and they have some hitters in this lineup. And that's one thing that I like too. I mean, James Tibbs is an absolute power plant, 5 home runs on the season already. All that dude does is hit home runs. Florida State, like Jeff said, to be fun to watch again. They've even made SportsCenter top 10 for 2 plays so far this season. So I think you cut down on the errors, and I love him to death because he's a Seminole, but a lot of that had to do with you got rid of Nander DeSadas. Like, you kind of got that hole out of there. Cam Smith has had a much better year at third base as well. But I just think when you look back to the lineup, having that much depth, I mean, I still like Noah Short, the sidearm guy. I like a lot of the other ones that they have coming in. I just think this is a team that, if they can stay healthy, they have the pieces to make some noise. Now, are they gonna be able to win the ACC with teams like Clemson in there and Wake Forest, who's just a juggernaut at baseball? It's hard to say, but I think that at the rate they're going, if they can keep it up against the better teams in the country that are on their schedule, and they're going to get their chance. Baseball's a crazy sport, man. I mean, you look at Florida; they just got beat by Stetson. That's a team you have on the schedule coming up. Florida Gulf Coast just beat Miami. Now, Florida Gulf Coast is good for those of you that follow baseball. And then you also had the other day, man, Kennesaw State absolutely whooped Clemson 18-1. Now Clemson ended up winning the series, but baseball is a funny sport, man. You can have one guy on the mound have a hot day. And I feel like this team, I don't want to judge too much off the level of competition, but I think this is a team that can find their way into the postseason. And Jeff, I'll let you share some thoughts on that before we talk about softball.
We both mentioned, the whole test. When's that first test coming? It's coming Sunday.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be honest, that's what I love to do. And that's why I kind of cover the baseball aspect of it. But you got Illinois. Illinois is going to be, that's just going to be, Cam Leiter's going to have, it's going to be like going to Walmart with $1 million. He can get anything he wants there, because it's going to be it's going to be nothing. Then you got Michigan State, who, granted, I mean, even a blind squirrel can find an acorn and a nut every now and then.
Yeah.
Because you look at Michigan State, who was like 2-5, I think, last night. Going into Georgia. And Jesse, me and you talked about it. Whenever I sent you that text, you was like, I already had them penciled down as a loss.
I almost made them 2-6 in my article.
Yeah. And I've been on them baseball teams. I've played baseball my whole life, and I've been on the team that you walk onto the field and you're like, oh, we're gonna roll them, and then they roll you.
Yeah.
But the team, and you mentioned Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast at the midweek, that's the closest thing to a Link Jarrett team as you can get, other than a Link Jarrett team when it's finally meshing. They got plate discipline, fielding percentages almost top in the country. I mean, you look at everything they do and they produce. I mean, they're a baseball school. That's what they are.
Yep.
But then you look at Western Michigan, and they've got 5 batters batting over 300.
Whew.
They've got 4 batters batting over 400.
That's crazy.
And I told you yesterday when we talked, they're averaging 10 runs a game. They're 6-2 on the year. They're averaging 10 runs a game. They're only giving up 6 runs a game.
Yeah.
I mean,
and they played Michigan, so it's not.
And they played Michigan. Yeah.
Right. It's not been a bunch of slappies out there.
Yeah. I mean, that's where our test is going to be. If we can get past them, that's going to build the confidence, and that's why I like the lesser opponents, because you got that feeling out period in baseball.
Yep.
And all the new pitchers we got and all the new players. Now we're getting into that gel moment.
Yeah.
In the last series or two, we've seen, what this team could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once they finally, say we get past Western Michigan, then we somehow get by Florida Gulf Coast. Once we get to that ACC play, and the ACC is, to all the SEC fans out there, I don't care, really, you can chant SEC no matter who you root for in that conference. The ACC, honestly, is one of the premier baseball conferences in the country.
Yeah, definitely.
When you look at it, Clemson, one of the top teams. Wake Forest.
Yep.
Pitt, normally it's good. Miami's normally good.
Yep.
Once Florida State gets back up there, there's not going to be no denying who the baseball conference is.
Yeah.
But that also comes with your opponents are going to be better. The games are going to be harder.
Yeah.
And with this pitching staff still learning the Link Jarrett way, and this defensive staff, it's going to be exciting. I think, honestly, I don't think there's ever going to be a time, because last year we didn't even make the ACC tournament
Yeah.
because we didn't have enough wins to even qualify for the ACC tournament.
Yeah.
I think this year, just what we've seen, and you mentioned Tibbs, and then you got Cam Smith right behind him. They went back to back the other night. Tibbs has 17 RBIs. That's up there in the top, I want to say 5 in the country right now. He's also, James Tibbs, I didn't even know this was a stat until I looked it up. He is tied in the country for the toughest to strike out.
Oh, wow.
That sounds like a good stat to be number one in.
That's a good stat to have. And you got Ferreau who hits. You got Jaime Ferreira, who's a good solid right behind Tibbs.
Yeah. Diamez Ross has been good too.
Diamez Ross, yes. Then you got also what's his name? Holbrook, the catcher we got last year that was injured. It's finally come together.
Yeah.
And this year, now am I saying we're going to win it all in Omaha? No. But I also wouldn't have said at the beginning of the season in 2013 that we would have been in Pasadena winning the national championship.
That's very true.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point too, that you're in a tough division. You're a tough conference. So it may not, like, you're probably not going to roll through and just dominate everybody. It's just not going to happen. But if you can get back to respectability, and I think the similarities with this team is kind of a lot like 2022 FSU, where it's like you knew going into any game that you had the potential to win. I mean, you could certainly lose, but you have the potential to win. And that Florida Gulf Coast series is going to be interesting because they did take the series win against Florida State last year. So, that's kind of a good barometer of where you're at. They just beat Miami. So if you beat them, you can feel good about that. And you got Miami coming up too. But yeah, I just feel like with the talent level that they have and the small improvements, and it's not been perfect. Don't get me wrong. Like, they still make some bonehead errors. They still got, you've had a couple of instances where Leiter and some of the pitchers struggle with some command issues, but they still got the stuff. It's just finding it. And so I think that's a lot of, we'll transition into softball real quick with the last few minutes we got here. But I think that's one of the things that you see out of softball too, is the bats are there and they have a couple of pitchers, but I think the struggles in the ring are what's really been holding this team back. And that to me, when me and Jeff did the season preview, one of the comments that we made was this softball team will go as far as the pitching will take them after losing their 3 best pitchers last year. And so far, it's not been that great. I mean, they're getting by, and they beat up on a lot of the teams. They're run ruling a lot of the teams that they're supposed to run rule. But I mean, you got your doors blown off by Georgia. And of course, they had the series canceled this weekend because of weather, which they would have faced some tough teams. But, they got to get better against the better competition. Now, you have no reason to doubt Lonnie Alameda. And they have some bats. I mean, I love some of the people on this team. I mean, Jasani Beecham as a freshman is a power plant. And I mean, I think she was 2 for 2 or 3 for 3 in her first game with 2 RBIs or her first 2 at bats. She's just popping home runs left and right. I mean, so you got the power in the lineup.
512.
Right. Yeah. And you get Michaela Edenfield with back-to-back walk-offs. Like, the bats are there. It's just they got to get that pitching figured out because they're I mean, even when you got run ruled by Georgia, you put up 10 runs and to still get run ruled. I mean, they got to figure out the defensive side of things.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if they can, and Jeff, I'll let you jump in here. I know you're the more expert of this, but my thing is, man, if they could just figure out how to steady the water when it comes to pitching, they may not be the, we don't have Sandercock, so we're not shutting down anybody's lineups this year. But but we know that we could score on average 8 to 10 runs a game, and if we can keep the opponents somewhere below that, simple math there, have more runs at the end of the game than the other team does, then man, this team can go as far as they want to. I'm not saying they'll win the whole thing because Oklahoma's still out there. But they could get as far as they want to. But man, to score 10 runs and still get run ruled, that tells you that your arms are not showing up. I mean, you have 2 pitchers on your team right now, and Emma Watson, or 3. Let me go back. Emma Wilson, McKenna Reed, and Ashton Delaney. But Wilson is at a 4.85 ERA. McKenna Reed's at 4.90. And then Ashton is at 5.62. And your best pitcher right now is Allison Royal, who's pitched 22 innings, and she's got a 0.62 ERA. And so you got to figure out, are we going to just ride that arm until it runs off, or are we going to try to mix in your 2 best? Your other pitcher, she's got a 0.98 ERA. So are we going to try to just kind of live with those and then just sprinkle in those other girls until they can kind of figure out where they are. I just, again, man, this team is so good on the bats. We cannot let the arms hold us back. So I don't know what I trust Lonnie. I think she'll figure it out. She'll get them right.
Like you said, you got Allison Royalty, who you can rely on. You have some other pitchers who just don't quite have the veteran experience, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
And so, like, I think the thing about Kat Sandercock was you could throw her into any situation
Yep.
and she could function. Whether she was your starter or a lot of times Lonnie would hold her back, not start her, but then in the
Bring
pressure
her in.
moments, bring her
Right.
in. They really need to find 2 or 3 more people that they can rely on in that lineup. I
Yep.
think you feel good about Allison Royalty, it's been nice to see her step up this year.
Yes, it
In
has.
her senior year, she kind of struggled a little bit last year, so it's
Yep.
been nice to have someone to step up. But and Ashton Danley, she's great, but she's still a freshman.
She's still a freshman.
She's still
Yeah.
learning, and the season is long, and they have a
Yep.
chance to get it figured out. And to be fair, they've still been winning games. I mean, they're still
Yeah.
putting W's in the win column.
That's
It's
right.
just once, kind of like we talked about with baseball, once you get to that tougher stretch of the season,
Yeah.
it's going to be you're going to have to prove that you're ready to go against a better competition. And it was a little bit of a shock when they lost to Charlotte to begin with. It was kind of like, well, that wasn't expected, but then they bounced
Yeah.
back, and so hopefully,
Right.
then they had a rough outing there in Clearwater, but again, this team has
Yep.
talent. They have the coaching. It's just whether or not they can do it on a consistent basis against that better competition, and they're going to probably need some more team or some more girls in the circle to step up, because right now they have a
Yep.
few that are good. They just don't have the depth that they had last year.
This team will find their way. I hope it's not kind of too late, once
Right.
they start
Yeah.
getting into it because of the ACC play. But I mean, we knew there was going to be a step back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, we didn't know how far. The team's not bad. I mean,
No. Yeah.
we've only lost 3 games. I mean, the team's not bad, but
Yeah.
it's not the standard that we know a Lonnie Alameda
Right.
FSU softball team could be.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And but you go back and look at the Lonnie Alameda teams, you had that dominant arm in the circle. You had a Megan King,
Yeah.
then a Kat Sandercock.
Yep.
And I mean, the list goes on and on from time before. That's the only difference. And can Allison Royalty, I like to call her the queen. Can she be that arm that leads us
Yeah.
consistently?
Yeah.
She struggled last year. She was injury prone last year. Does that come back up? Possible. But you got a Mimi Gordon that's a freshman if her and McKenna Reed and Ashton Danley can finally get meshed to where they're perfect, or not, I didn't say perfect, but they're performing at a high elite level.
Yeah.
Coach Lonnie's going to start stacking
Dubs.
NCAA championships. You're going to,
Yeah.
instead of Oklahoma, it's going to be Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to be talking Florida State and Tallahassee. That's where you want to be.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think they just have to, like you said, they got to bring the young players up to speed, and they got to do it quickly because the
Yep.
schedule is about to get tough, and it's about to count for ACC play. But again, it's like you just saw all the top 5 preseason stuff coming out, all the top 100 players and all that stuff, and I think it blinded us from the fact that they were losing some pieces,
That's right.
and it was going to happen. It's just kind of like when you watch Alabama this year. Like if the first time they have like a 9-3 season, or 9-4 season, or 10-3, they're going to freak out, and it's going to be funny to watch. It's not funny to experience, which is kind of what we're going through. But like Jeff said, I mean, we've only lost a couple games.
Right.
They're still putting wins in the win column. They're still
Right.
run ruling the teams that they're supposed to. It's
Right.
just they gotta find something for that better competition. But
That's right.
that's going to do it for us today, guys. We just wanted to throw a little bit of football talk out there, and then transition into some round ball sports, because again, man, FSU baseball, like Jeff said, it's been fun to watch again, and hopefully they can maintain that through the better competition. And softball, it's fun to watch. It's just a little more stressful because you have that higher standard
That's
you
right.
hold into. It's just different, but it's still fun to watch. And like I said, they're the ones that are going to get us through into the spring, and then while we go through the summer waiting on football. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, support those that support us. Alumni Hall FSU. Head on over there, get you some new FSU gear for 10% off by using code SPEAR. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you guys on the next one. And as always, go
Go
Noles.
Noles.